In this month-long series, I'm breaking down how the parts work model can help you heal, deepen connection to self and others, and really transform the way you show up in all of your relationships, especially the one that you have with yourself. Hi, I'm Amy Rose White. I'm an integrative psychotherapist. My channel is all about psychospiritual self-healing. So the self, what is it? That is the core spiritual essence of internal family systems. And it is the seat of the transformative process within parts work as a modality, both used in therapy and on your own. Because ideally, the deeper healing of really wounded, shameful, painful material happens in the container of therapy, but that we take the method and the structure of parts work into our daily lives so that we can improve the relationship we have with our internal system and community that has existed since we have, and its only goal is to help us get along, survive, and thrive. What's perhaps most important to know about the self, and I say capital S self, in parts work is that it isn't something to be created or built. It's actually something to be uncovered or revealed or reunited with. The self is the truest essence of who we are, which is why, to me, parts work is truly a psychospiritual healing modality by nature, because it's taking the wisdom of the contemplative and Eastern philosophical cultures to draw on the concept, which I suppose can be found in some of the world's religions as well, that there is an eternal essence of who we are. Some might call it soul. It could be called wise mind in dialectical behavior therapy. It could be called the witnessed in many Eastern forms of spirituality, or the observer. It is the most grounded essence of who we are, and it's what's accessible to us usually outside times of stress. So if you're in the mountains, enjoying nature, I live in a small ski town, so what just went through my mind is if you're skiing an amazing line and some fresh powder and you're just in your element, or perhaps you're laying on the ground at a park on a blanket and just watching the sky and watching clouds float by, there's a sense of inner peace, tranquility, and safety, as well as security that comes over us. And when we're in that place, we are accessing self-energy. And that's why it's such a powerful source of healing, because there's energy from that access point to find what in IFS or parts work we call the 8 C's. As you can see in this diagram here, the 8 C's are curiosity, compassion, clarity, creativity, confidence, connectedness, calm, and courage. Let's go through them all, and I'll give examples. Curiosity is often the most easy to access quality of self-energy. When we make access with exiles or protective parts, which I talked about in my last video linked here, we can only do healing work with parts when we come from a place of access to self and self-energy. And what happens is that our parts, when they're in protective mode or even exiled mode, is they blend with that self-energy, and it's hard to access objectivity and feel like we have some distance to be able to learn and understand and work with those parts and really become familiar with how they're trying to help us, especially when they're engaging in behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that don't feel good to us or we have a judgment about. So a huge part of the IFS process is accessing self-energy and unblending from those parts so that we can deeply understand them. And that's what leads to the healing process. So curiosity is just what it sounds like. It's where we're neutral enough and grounded enough that we genuinely can set our agenda aside. And really, that's the difference between being in self-energy and being blended with a part, is parts have agendas. They want to get something done. They want to keep us from feeling XYZ. They want to keep us safe. They want to protect us in the right now moment. Self-energy has the time and the room and the sort of breathing space to just learn and listen. And that's the C of curiosity. From that place, the C of compassion allows us to understand in that moment that part has a legitimate reason, even if it's not preferable to us, for why it's showing up in our world that way. And compassion is always the starting place for understanding. We can't get anywhere unless we have a sense of really love and gentleness and, a true sense of appreciation even for each part that we are dialoguing with. Clarity gives us access to a sense that we are in an adult place where we can understand the meaning and purpose behind each of our parts. Until that happens, and by the way, I realize that the light is kind of like going on and off during this video, and I don't really understand why, and I cannot figure out how to fix that. I'm going to mess with the lighting for a second. With clarity, we improve our ability to ascribe meaning to why all the parts are doing what they do and how they show up. When we're accessing our creative nature, which is a huge part of self-energy, we can offer parts what they need in ways that are really hard to imagine when we're blended with them. We see choices, we see opportunity, we have flexibility in our thinking. We're not rigid and dogmatic. Perhaps when we're blended, we want the part to go away or stop, or shift into some totally different way of being. And with creativity, we can actually have the flexibility to, through the healing process, enliven those parts to have different opportunities to actually shift into roles that they might prefer and that usually serve our lives a whole lot better. When we're able to access the creativity that's part of self-energy, we can be in the flow or in the zone if you're playing sports. There's just a limitless amount of potential, whether it's artistically or relationally or physically and athletically, that's available from self-energy, because we're not preoccupied with some protector that is showing up in a way that keeps us from being in the right now present moment of whatever it is that we're doing. Connectedness is another real spiritual aspect of parts work, because it allows us to see that parts are an element of the whole system that is us. It's actually a wonderful book called Altogether Us, which is about using EMDR with parts work. And also that we are part of the unified field of human consciousness and also simply pure consciousness itself, which goes far beyond just the human experience. And it's that sense of interconnectedness that provides, particularly people that have a lot of traumatized, terrified, wounded parts, a sense of safety and security. And that connectedness is why access to self-energy is the difference between showing up in reactivity and not knowing why you feel so overwhelmed all the time, or why you had maybe what you deem an overreaction to something when other people didn't think it was that big of a deal. It allows us to feel that safety, because that essence of connectedness is kind of like being part of a universal or even galactic family where you never truly feel alone. And that is why we are traumatized typically, is that we're experiencing an overwhelming emotion or scary experience that we perceive we're in isolation with. And a large part of accessing self-energy involves a process called witnessing, where whatever original material a part came to protect us from, we're able to have the self witness that material over again in a healing way, because we're no longer alone with it. Confidence comes from accessing self-energy because it's really the sense of knowing who you are. Self-energy is all about that. And from my perspective, and the way I would describe parts work, although maybe not everyone would share my opinion, that is the seed of that safety and security. And confidence is actually knowing that we are the self. We are all these 8 C's together when we're accessing self-energy. That there's something at our very, very deep divine core essence that, in the meditation tradition that I follow, is truly, it's also called the self. And my teacher says, dwell on the self, meditate on the self. God is within you as you. And you don't have to use the word God if that's, activating or not the right fit for you. It could be source, spirit, universe, life, nature, whatever language. We're trying to access this sense that with that deep, deep knowing of who we truly are, we can access the confidence to do anything, including face scary, difficult material that might now be available to us via parts work. Because it's not all easy. It's about asking protectors and getting them to trust us and understanding them with the goal of them eventually stepping to the side, giving us enough room to be with the material they were protecting us from. And I'll give more examples of how that looks in my next video. Then we come to calm, and that's just as easy as it sounds. From a place of center where you are kind of your own port in the storm, there's a sense of relaxation and connection to the earth and groundedness that comes from accessing self-energy. And you've been there perhaps at a time in crisis when everyone's freaking out and you just got really in the zone and you made the call you need to do, or you administered the first aid you need to do, or you got kids to a safe location, or did whatever was necessary in that moment, or just pulled the car over. That calm, which, there are other things that take over for us. Sometimes they are protectors in emergency situations, but sort of that sense, maybe a better example would be, if a child in your life is having a tantrum and you surrender to the fact that there's nothing you can do to make this stop. And you just bear witness to their deep, deep, big emotions that don't make any sense to us adults. That kind of calm allows the emotional intensity to kind of course correct and settle on its own. And that's no different than when we're dialoguing with parts. And lastly, courage. It takes courage to do this work. It takes courage to be alive and choose to stay on the planet. It takes courage to face deeply buried material, what Dick Schwartz calls basement children. It takes courage to recognize that we can have parts that show up in our lives that act in really ineffective or even destructive and hurtful ways to people and aspects of our life, while also being a good, valuable, lovable human being. It takes courage to do that. And if you've ever done something scary or hard and you stepped into that fire anyway, you've accessed that element of self-energy. A quick example of how self-energy feels in the body is it is really a state of relaxation. There's less tension than perhaps we're normally carrying. Our breath is slow and deep, and there's a sense in our bodies of nowhere else to be and nothing else to do. So here's a quick drop-in practice to access self-energy. It really is about acting as if. So if we soften our jaw, we allow the front face of our body to relax a little. We breathe in deeply and we breathe out long. And we stretch that exhale out like taffy. And then we focus on something in our environment that we can appreciate. In my house, I have a bunch of really beautiful, healthy, huge plants. Or my cat, or my kids when they're at home, or a sunset as it's already happened outside my window right now. If we just spend a few moments noticing that our heart is beating without us having to make any effort, and that once again the sun rose and set without us having to do anything about it. If we can take a moment to notice if we're lucky enough to have a warm place to sleep tonight or food in the cupboard. If there's a sense of gratitude for any part of your life that is working, you're in self-energy. So I encourage you to do that practice at least once a day, and especially whenever you're overwhelmed by some emotion you don't understand and you'd like to get to know what part is active and needs your time, attention, love, and presence. That is one entryway into self-energy to begin the process. I still look forward to making more videos on this topic. Please let me know your comments below. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. It truly is a love of mine to share this knowledge and spend time with you today. Until next time, may you be at peace, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you be safe. Bye for now.